He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Tēnā koutou irirangi te motu I te pūtia tautoko kārawe. Kia ora. My name is Moana Maniapoto. In this podcast series, The Negotiators, we meet the gutsy characters who steered their tribes through a minefield of complex treaty settlement negotiations. These are their stories. Sir Michal Cullen was the Minister of Treaty Negotiations. After he left Parliament, he jumped the fence to become lead negotiator for Ngāti Tūwharetoa. Along with Paramount Chief Ariki Tūwharetoa, Sir Michal helped bring the iwi together to cut a deal, one that had eluded the Crown and Māori for more than 20 years.
Much of what Pākehā take for granted was built on the back of exploitation and loss. They need to understand that these settlements aren't generous. It's a drop in the bucket. It's well under 1% of our total national income. Treaty settlements are generous. They're generous on the part of the iwi, not the Crown.
We're Māori, and we won't get justice till we've got a Māori flag.
Today, we are strong enough and honest enough to learn the lessons of the last 150 years.
You have not honoured the treaty.
And to admit that the treaty has been imperfectly observed.
I was inspired to be involved with the Tūwharetoa claim. I was honoured because it was part of what I see as an enormously important historical process in New Zealand.
Ngāti Tūwharetoa historian Te Kanawa Pitiroi held the important role of preserving the traditions and knowledge of the tribe.
Ngāti Tūwharetoa
Ngāti Tūwharetoa descend from their famous namesake, whose bloodlines stretch to those in Tokorangi and Kawero. And that's who we are today.
Politician, can you make a right decision for all of us? Yeah, for all of us.
I was Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Leader of the House, Attorney General. In the 2008 election, the Republic of New Zealand freed me to pursue other opportunities, as they say.
There will be a new national-led government in New Zealand.
Will you walk the walk, or will you bring us comfort? Or will you bring us comfort?
That led on to Tūwharetoa approaching me about becoming one of their lead negotiators.
Sir Timu Te Heuheu, the Ariki of Ngāti Tūwharetoa, believed Sir Michal would be a great asset to the negotiations team, given they had already been in discussion with the government for 20 years.
There were things that he could be helpful for in terms of helping us move our purpose forward.
George Asher was also leading the negotiations team with Sir Michal.
The Tūwharetoa settlement was basically overseen by Ngāti Tūwharetoa Hapu Forum, which represented the interests of the 26 hapu.
Another team member was Gina Rangi.
He worked for us for 8 years plus, and yet even near the end he'd go to meetings and certain kaumātua would say, "You're just here for the Crown." And he kept trying to explain, "No, I'm actually your negotiator. I'm not trying to defend the Crown's decision on this. I'm trying to challenge it."
So many instances where people really were speaking from the heart. You felt that sort of weight of history on you.
Gina Rangi reflects on whakapapa.
Ko Tūwharetoa te iwi, ko Tūwharetoa te hapu. So we're a very strong iwi, and we're also very strong as hapu. What brings us together as hapu is opposition to outsiders and also our ariki. He comes from the different lines of whakapapa across the rohe, so he is senior kaumātua at every marae.
If we're part of that whakapapa, then we have a responsibility to do what is correct and right. You know, I keep saying that if we don't work together, then we fail our mokopun.
Nearly all the sort of losses that occurred to Tūwharetoa were major developments which were justified in the national interest.
In the 40s and the 50s, it was the 5 or 6 dams on the Waikato River, which flooded Waihi Tupuna, Kāinga, really important sites for my people who are river people. And then in the 60s and 70s, it was the flooding of land at Lake Taupo. It was the Tongariro power scheme, the geothermal power scheme at Wairake, and our people carried all the environmental destruction.
Whole cliff faces were cut into for road building and so on, which were full of koiwi. People are driving over your ancestors.
George Asher joined Sir Michael on the negotiations team.
If you follow the legacy of Ngāti Tūwharetoa, it's a legacy that's full of contributions to the people of New Zealand, to the public good, but we've never been good at looking after ourselves.
Most of the land was lost through the exercise of native land court system. The native land courts was pretty much set up with the intention of facilitating the transfer of Maori collective land into private ownership, so it was easier for it to be split up and bought by settlers or taken over by the Crown. Land was transferred out of that hapu ownership into just 10 named people. And essentially it was an immediate breach of course, the Treaty of Waitangi.
There were the takings of the mountains and all of the land around the peaks of the mountains, which are now in the Tongariro National Park. The Department of Conservation held something like a third of Arohe.
Hoani Te Heuheu put his case before the Privy Council, calling for the treaty to be honoured. And the Privy Council simply said, if it's not in the body of the law, then government can do nothing.
There were members of Tūwharetoa who fought alongside Te Koti, for example. We were supporters of the kingitanga, so there were different ways of trying to resist.
In terms of the Crown's performance, that history is shocking. It creates a huge expectation about the nature and the size of the compensation that each hapu should have.
Sir Michael recalls his time growing up in England.
I was born in North London in 1945, and then we immigrated in 1955 to New Zealand. It was a very different place from the North London that I left, semi-pioneering almost by post-war London standards. But then I got a scholarship to Christ College, which of course was a school for boys from wealthy backgrounds, and I wasn't. And then off to university, first person in my family to go on to tertiary education. My master's degree thesis was on poverty in late 19th century London, which was very much about where 3 of my 4 grandparents came from, both geographically and socially. And then, of course, I went and taught at Dunedin, Otago University, and then went into politics, became the Labour Party candidate for St Kilda in 1980.
You can talk the talk, but will you walk the walk away?
Under the Labour government, Helen Clark appointed Sir Michael as Minister of Treaty Negotiations in 2007.
Helen wanted to do a bit of a reshuffle. By that stage, I sort of developed, I think, some knowledge and, funnily enough, some respect amongst Māori. I think people understood that I'd learned a lot in the process of the Forest and Sea Pit. With treaty settlements, you've got to have both patience and drive, and that's a very difficult combination to achieve. I was keen to see us make much more progress than we had made to that point. Given the fact the Māori vote was very important to Labour, given the long history of association between Māori and the Labour Party, the kind of pressures the Minister's going to face will be pressures from colleagues, persuading the Minister of Conservation that some part of the conservation estate may be transferred into the ownership of an iwi or hapu, or persuading them that the management arrangements are going to change. Māori leaders really do want face-to-face discussions with the Minister. Thursday was set aside for treaty issues, and we deal pretty quickly with the formalities at the start because I was running, 6 or 7 different meetings that day around treaty issues. I would claim that as Minister for just 1 year in 2008, I managed to get things moving quite rapidly, particularly with the Central North Island Forest Lands deal. So we had to get a collective agreement around the Central North Island forests before it was possible to move on to these other Central North Island iwi settlements, including, actually, of course, Tūwharetoa. I'd been advised by Office of Treaty Settlements that there was no chance of doing the settlement. They believed it was doomed to failure. Treasury was very sceptical. But Tatumu Tahihu said that he'd got together a coalition of the 8 iwi, and he was confident that we could deliver a settlement.
George Asher became the lead negotiator for the Central North Island Forest Iwi Collective. A unique feature of the CNI Forest Collective settlement was the agreement that iwi themselves, rather than the Crown, would decide which areas of the returned lands would belong to each of the 8 iwi in the collective.
They nominated me to be the lead negotiator, and I also had 2 other negotiators with me. And on the Crown side, basically it was Dr. Cullen.
This was a chance to do with by far the largest proportion of the Central North Island forest lands in one go.
Both parties understood fully that if you start segregating parts of a contiguous forest, you actually destroy the value. So we came to an arrangement.
The accumulated rentals were paid directly to the settling iwi, so Tūwharetoa, $60-odd million. The land, and eventually also all the full cutting rights, will go back to iwi in the 2040s, I think it is. And without Tatumu leading that coalition, that settlement could not have occurred. A number of concerns were in my mind about becoming negotiator for an iwi. First was I hadn't done it before, so this was quite different, and it was a quite different process, particularly from the Central North Island Forest deal, which was one where I had Treasury working on my behalf.
Tātumu understood after working on the CNI forestry settlement with Sir Michael, it would keep them in good stead for their tribal settlement.
The vision was no different to what we were thinking for the CNI. In other words, working as a collective.
Here I was going to be dealing directly with Office of Treaty Settlements, but also establishing credibility with all the different elements within Tūwharetoa. They're by no means of one mind on many issues. So how was this going to hold together through a treaty settlement process?
Gina Rangi understood that the process was a complex mix of negotiation and compromise.
Everybody has these real moments of doubt and are we doing the right thing? And that's whether you're in support of a settlement or against a settlement. Every single person is trying their best to make generational decisions, and that's really hard.
There was some talk about, because I've been a minister, therefore, not only could I open the door, but, vast amounts of gold bullion would pour out through it. I did spend quite a bit of time in those early meetings trying to bring expectations down, to explain just what the treaty process was actually like, that you did get back only a small proportion of the land that was lost. That the Crown, for a start, was not going to put any private land on the table. That was completely out of the question. They weren't going to put all the dock land on the table. We might get some bits back. I always saw my key role, because of the background, as being to how to translate those feelings into practical outcomes which were deliverable.
The decisions that were made after our meetings and discussions were decisions not from Sir Michael, but were decisions by Tūwharetoa.
The process puts people through an awful lot of hoops unnecessarily and could be much circumvented in many ways if people were focused on the end point and not on the sort of ritual dance.
And it's probably because of his status. He was cheeky enough to look outside the square.
Somebody from DOC would say in the meeting that this couldn't be done because it was policy. And I would say, almost thumping the table, I've been a minister, I know policy can be changed.
Only one time I saw him lose his temper. And he had warned myself and one of the other tribal negotiators, look, we're going into a meeting, they may say some things that are not very good, and probably pretty toxic, and I just, we've just got to keep our cool. Well, they said the most racist things, and I just sort of sat there and gave them the death stare. Sir Michael lost his rag.
I think I've learnt a lot about my ability to be patient. It's been a long process, and I think I've certainly learned far more about how Māori see the world. Because you can be an MP for an overwhelmingly Pākehā electorate and go right to the end for a long time and still not have much understanding.
For Gina, the historical account was central to the claim.
A big part of every settlement is the historic account, and it's not just a story, it is the basis for which all of the cultural and commercial redress flows. Usually the Crown tries to just do an overview, and we were really adamant that ours had to reflect across Aotearoa fairly all of the stories and the multiplicity of stories. A normal historic account is about 20 pages, ours was over 160. Every single word was negotiated. Many of those words were negotiated repeatedly. So the difference between the Crown knew, the Crown disregarded, the Crown willfully disregarded, like all of those words have different levels of meaning, and the Crown's very, very keen to protect what reputation they still have, and so they fight to minimise the words all the way throughout the historic account.
One of the most important aspects of the settlement for Ariki Tūwharetoa was recognition of his ancestors' true intention around the story of the maunga. Historian Te Kanawa Pitiroi.
Ngāti Tūwharetoa climbed up Tongariro Mountain, turned towards the east and proclaimed all the land from Kaimanawa Ranges to the Hauhungaro Ranges for his people and descendants. The maunga, for that reason, is very tapu to Ngāti Tūwharetoa.
One of the great sort of stories around Tūwharetoa is the generous gift by Te Hehu of the time of Tauranga Ngārahui and Ruapehu to the Crown in 1887.
It wasn't actually gifted, it was that kupu were get the whakatapua, which means to sanctify the maunga, not give it away as a gift.
Just because you have a Waitangi Tribunal report doesn't mean the Crown's going to agree. Crown-appointed tribunal members had agreed with us that it was not a gift, and we still had to negotiate that.
The Crown have been showing great interest in the development of tourism in the Central North Island, and Te Hehu, representing Tūwharetoa, did not want to see this because they knew that this would lead to people trampling over sacred sites. What he thought he was doing was he was bringing the Queen, the Crown, the government, into a partnership to protect those mountaintops.
And instead what we saw was initially a partnership and then very quickly the minimisation of our voice and disempowering of Tūwharetoa in the process.
The Crown thought it had gained outright ownership. Well, in the settlement, we have managed to establish that was wrong, that it wasn't a gift, and we have to have a combined negotiation with the Crown around a settlement for the national park.
Pātumu was adamant that the historical accounts set the record straight around the so-called gifting of the maunga.
It was really important for us to get that story correct. Otherwise, the generations to come will be confused.
Ngāti Tūwharetoa, are you ready?
One of the dangers of the whole settlement process is it divides hapu from hapu, it divides iwi from iwi, because, of course, traditional boundaries weren't hard and fast lines on a map like sort of a map of English counties. In the process, we didn't manage to hold all of the hapu together in harmony. I'm not sure I was always helpful in that regard.
Chris Finlayson was a Minister of Treaty Negotiations at the time.
To the resilient iwi that is Ngāti Tūwharetoa, to your ariki, your beloved tupuna, your hapu and your whānau, the Crown offers this long overdue apology.
The Crown has to come out of its fastness in Wellington and come on to the marae and to apologise in detail. These are very emotional moments.
It wasn't just about those of us who were here on the day, keep thinking of Raukawa and all those families lying over there. They were part and parcel of the journey.
In a way, I think it's sad that more Pākehā don't come and share in them and get just a feeling, a flavour of what their history has been about.
The comprehensive settlement is valued at approximately 180 million. It includes the iwi's part of the Central North Island CNI settlement in 2008, the return of 34 culturally significant sites and the right to first refusal on 5 commercial properties and land taken by the Crown.
The formula around treaty settlements is a bit like throwing about 3 darts simultaneously at 4 different dartboards and hoping you don't actually hit anybody on the way. But it relates to the nature of land loss, the amount of land lost, whether it was lost through raupatu, through compulsory acquisition, to things like what's the population, what's the size of this iwi, is it a small iwi?
Historian Te Kanoa Putiroi was disappointed with the settlement.
We expected more, but I think, like other tribes, you don't get what you really want.
It was always clear that the additional money over and above the Crown Forest lands part of it was going to be pretty small. And that's one of the reasons why the whole guts of our settlement is around relationship issues. It's about reasserting its ability to strongly influence decisions made within that rohe.
For George Asher, the settlement was all about the long term.
Once the dots are joined, I think people will understand a lot better just how we're going to progress the stuff. And it's not a 100-metre dash.
The big win is that Tūwharetoa has an enormous say in the future around 2 key issues. The management of the entire catchment area of Lake Taupo, and also around the management of Dock Estate.
One bone of contention was the introduction of foreign species to their area.
This part of Lake Taupo is known as the picket fence because on a busy day there's often dozens of people standing here in a line fishing for trout.
And then there's another partnership down in relation to the trout fishery. This is effectively the compensation, the redress for the fact that trout were introduced to provide angling opportunities for Pākehā fishers, but at the expense of the traditional fisheries used by Tūwharetoa people. This settlement again was unusual in that the transfer occurred not to a small group, but to effectively a meeting of all the hapu of Tūwharetoa. So there's 26 hapu. That took a lot of arguing with Office of Treaty Settlements to have what was in fact therefore a hapu-based, hapu-centric, hapu-accountable body as the post-settlement governance entity for Tūwharetoa.
Pātumu was clear the voice of hapu was important.
People have a very strong perspective about how their whenua might be developed. What are the values of their whenua?
The finding that Ngāpuhi didn't cede sovereignty, I think, is a justifiable finding. Going back to the past in this respect only provides us one clear conclusion, that sovereignty wasn't ceded, but doesn't give us a clear conclusion about what was and what that means for today.
Tino rangatiratanga and kaitiakitanga. And those are the realms of the hapu. The durability part of any settlement really relies on the unity of the hapu, the hunger of the hapu to maintain the identity as Ngāti Tūwharetoa.
Coming together is actually a bigger kaupapa.
I think with the treaty settlement process, it's still too early to tell what the success is. But I think what the measures will be over the longer term is, firstly, do Māori feel that their place in New Zealand is properly recognised? Do Pākehā understand what the treaty settlement process has been about? Do they understand that the settlement process has handed back or given monetary compensation, which is only a small proportion of the harm which was done are Māori able to effectively participate in the decisions that affect them, and are the obvious gaps in social and economic well-being between Māori and the rest of the population largely removed.
In 1995, the fiscal envelope hui called by Sir Tumu's father, Sir Hepi Te Heoheo, was a key moment in the call for national solidarity.
Over 1,000 tribal representatives were at the hui, heeding the call of this man, Sir Hepi Te Heoheo.
You know, when Sir Hepi called people to Hirangi in 1995, he was saying, government, you are unfair to our people. Don't be so selfish. That ingrained itself in a lot of our people, right throughout Aotearoa.
There are obviously those who very deeply feel that all the Crown land that there is should have been handed back, and I have some sympathy with that. On the other hand, it's still a damn good settlement by the standards of most.
Ngāti Tūwharetoa did not sign the Treaty of Waitangi in recognition of the significance of Tongariro National Park as a taonga tuku, an ancestor, a treasure. Ngāti Tūwharetoa is negotiating alongside other iwi and hapu for cultural redress from the Crown. Thanks for listening to The Negotiators, produced by Tāwera and Black Pearl Productions, made with the support of NZ On Air and RNZ. You can find the podcast on the RNZ website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Tēnā koutou irirangi te motu I te pūtia tautoko, ka rawe.